G'day guys and gal! The Great Crusade was a pretty awesome time in humanity's history, and not such a great time for literally everyone else. A powerful godlike emperor leading 20 literal demigods who each had a legion of super soldiers, not to mention the countless trillion guardsmen and other military personnel. With such overwhelming power, mankind reunited its old empire and they claimed dominion over the galaxy, having 1 million worlds under their domain. The real impressive part is that it only took them like 200 years. It truly was a glorious time. There isn't much I can think of in a fantasy or sci-fi setting which could have matched the power of the Imperium at its peak, like they low-key beat Cthulhu. So it might surprise you to hear that not all Primarchs, the main tools of the Crusade, were stoked about it. Many of them became disillusioned with all the xeno-genocide, and others were just massive assholes. But by the end of it, many were discontent. After all, if everyone was super happy about it, then half of them wouldn't have sold their souls to the forces of hell near the end of it. Today we'll be going over each Primarch and sussing out their opinion of the Great Crusade. By doing so, it's likely we can get a good understanding of why each Primarch ended up either staying loyal or betraying the Emperor. Let's get into it. First up is the Lion. Mr. L. Johnson is incredibly steadfast and loyal, more so than his other brothers. The Emperor trusted him completely, which is why he gave the Lion all the Dark Age of technology weapons that the other legions weren't even allowed to know about. The Lion was very keen for the role of War Master, and he was disappointed when Horus got it instead, showing that he was pretty into the whole Great Crusade vibe, and he relished the chance to kill mankind's enemies, in style. Even after being decimated during the run-done Xenocide, which is that Cthulhu shit I mentioned, the Lion and his Dark Angel still didn't turn sour or lose faith in the Emperor. The fact that the Lion went out of his way to destroy nearly every single traitor homeworld at the end of the Horus Heresy shows how much he valued the Great Crusade. For the crime of ruining his fun, his brothers lost their homes. The second Primarch probably fucking hated the Great Crusade because he was killed and his name forgotten during it. Like the Lion, Fulgrim was super loyal and into the Great Crusade. Unlike the Lion, he was not steadfast or reliable, and he enjoyed sucking his dick way too much. Fulgrim didn't question the Great Crusade at all, genociding Xeno races without a second thought. It was almost like he was too into the Great Crusade though. When a new Xeno race would be discovered and the Imperium wanted to try peacefully talk to them and maybe integrate them as a client state, which was a thing by the way, Fulgrim was like, no, genocide, and he would attack them. This is what happened with the Leia, and Fulgrim also ended up destroying a number of Eldar Maiden worlds just because he could. Fulgrim was like a mentally ill puppy, sucking up to its emperor and wanting to be loved. This instability combined with low-key demonic corruption resulted in Fulgrim abandoning the Great Crusade in favor of Horus's rebellion and Slaanesha's many supple breasts. Perturabo didn't really vibe the Great Crusade, probably had something to do with the fact that he always fought in the most horrific grueling war zones, suffering immense casualties. He got more and more jaded with each victory, becoming a huge fucking dick as time went on. He was so callous and bitter that to serve as a guardsman under Perturabo was a death sentence, and he would make you do suicidal charges at enemy gunlines for no apparent reason. Eventually, they had to start sending only penal legions and criminals to serve with Perty, because morale was getting so bad with the Imperial army. It didn't help that Rogueldorn, a Primarch very similar to Perty, was universally respected and allowed to build marvels, even being chosen as the Praetorian of Terror. Ironically, if Perty had just spoken up about wanting to fill more of a builder creation role rather than the Siege Master, he probably could have gotten the job, but he chose to suffer in silence and just get super salty about everything. So yeah, wasn't exactly his favourite thing ever. Jagedai Khan is a sensible man. He saw that the Emperor was a tyrant and that the Great Crusade was a vicious, bloody conquest, but he also saw refusing to join would result in his own death. On top of that, he recognized that the Emperor wasn't that bad and that his vision for humanity was acceptable. So whilst Jagedai wasn't jumping with joy like some of his brothers were, he was pretty happy to ride space motorbikes around the galaxy and kill alien ass. It's important to note that whilst the Khan might seem like a bit of a savage, he probably had the most common sense out of all of the Primarchs. Is the Imperium good? No. Is it better than a bunch of demonic rapists or rampaging aliens? Yes. Hence Jagedai would always pick the lesser evil if he was given the choice. That was his approach to the Great Crusade. Russ was incredibly loyal to the Emperor and he jumped at the Great Crusade with earnest. It only took him a couple weeks to master and understand the ways of space warfare and galactic crusades before he was ready to set off on his own. Russ was the Emperor's executioner, and as such, was tasked with some pretty nasty business. It's theorized that Russ was the Primarch who killed one or both of the missing Primarchs. Russ also fought and nearly killed Angron before attacking and nearly killing Magnus. So out of all of his brothers, Russ was the first to engage a Primarch in battle, multiple times before anyone else. This didn't shake his resolve, however. He never seemed to question the Emperor, and he maintained his belief in him, so it's fair to say that he was a big believer in the Great Crusade. Rogueldorn wasn't the most outspoken of the Primarchs, but he believed heavily in the Emperor's vision. He saw the Great Crusade as an opportunity to build, hence the Imperial Fist became known for solidifying the Imperium's presence on a conquered world by building a big-ass fortress on it. Roguel believed so much in his father's vision and the purity of their conquest that when he heard that Conrad had a vision of the Horus heresy, aka Astartes killing each other, he lost his usually unchanging temper and he raged, infuriated that someone could even insinuate the possibility for that kind of treachery. Little naive there, Roguel, but hey, we will rebuild. The only time Dorn's resolve was actually broken and he began to question himself and the Imperium was when he was carrying his father's broken corpse to the Golden Throne. Can't really blame him on that one, that would fuck me up as well. Conrad did not have a good time during the Great Crusade, mostly because his brain was fucking melting half the time and showing him super dark visions. Conrad straight up said that he wished he was left alone to rule his own planet. That way he never would have gotten all those fucked up visions and his planet wouldn't have devolved back into a crime-infested cesspit as soon as he left. The latter of those points being a bit of a sensitive spot for poor Conrad. Conrad was also not very well liked by his brothers for obvious reasons, and even quite a number of his sons weren't too keen on him. You might think that the fact that he could scare and torture the galaxy would be a big plus side for him, but Conrad isn't actually sadistic, surprisingly. He doesn't actually enjoy the pain and fear of others, or at least he pretends he doesn't. His terror tactics are to subjugate enemies with minimal losses of life and infrastructure, not because he likes Halloween, so he couldn't even get a sadistic stiffy to make up for how much he hated his life. It's no wonder he turned his back on the Emperor so easily. Sanguinius had a bit of a rough upbringing, landing on an irradiated wasteland planet where mutants killed the few remaining humans on the daily. As such, when told that the Great Crusade was a way that all those suppressed scared humans could be liberated and raised up, he was pretty keen. Sanguinius didn't love or relish war, but he wasn't afraid to go Super Saiyan if he needed to. He was also a very sensible lad. Insecure, sure, but very sensible. As such, whenever the Emperor did one of his shit dad Emperor things, such as lying to his sons or going a little bit too hard on the war crimes, instead of going, "Ha, see, dad is shit, let's go fuck demons and kill babies," like half his brothers did, Sangi would instead say, "Whilst I would prefer that father didn't lie, he has his reasons and I trust him. Even if it was a real mistake on his part, I would still rather stand beside him than suckle on some demonic tits. Talking to you, Fulgrim, you fucking freak." That last part might have been a bit of embellishment on my part, but he definitely thought it at least once or twice. Sanguinius remained a steadfast supporter of the Great Crusade, any of the issues he had with it not being enough to influence any of his actions or loyalty. Primarch 10 is Ferris, who had a blast. Ferris was a very combative, confrontational war lover. He deliberately prevents his world from becoming civilized or united so they can produce great warriors. He was one of his father's closest sons, offering advice and opinions on the other Primarchs. Ferris was so infuriated with Fulgrim for betraying the Crusade and the Imperium that he instantly tried to kill him, despite the fact that they had the closest relationship out of all the Primarchs. That's how loyal he was to the Emperor and his vision, he didn't even hesitate. It's just a shame he lost his head. Primarch 11 had just as much fun with the Great Crusade as Primarch 2, which is none at all, unless he was a massive matricist or just a suicidal little emo. Angron had mixed opinions about the Great Crusade. He hated it because he hated everything. He also didn't have his gladiator brothers and sisters by his side, so he was eternally resentful towards the Emperor and his vision for that. On the other hand, he was now able to massacre entire worlds using big fancy toys and a legion of super soldiers, so that was definitely a plus. But he would have felt that satisfaction from any other warlike conquest, hence why he was so happy to abandon the Great Crusade and betray the Emperor when the opportunity arose. So overall, he couldn't give two shits about the Crusade or the Emperor, as long as he had something to kill. Giliman probably had the most interesting opinion of the Great Crusade, and unlike most of the other Primarchs, we literally get to see his thought process and reflection of it, making my job 1000 times easier. Giliman thought of the Crusade as a necessary evil, but that didn't stop him from privately disapproving of some of the Emperor's actions. Stuff like xenogenocide or the Emperor making Giliman punish Lorgai by blowing up his favourite city were examples of shit that didn't sit right with Giliman. G-Man would regularly argue with his brothers and the morality and ethics of what they were doing and how they were doing it. He then reflected that the Great Crusade must have been a crude, yet temporary phase of mankind's ascension, one that should have ended in a golden age, but instead became the Horus heresy. His internal thoughts on the matter are very interesting, and they go back and forward. I won't link it because last time I linked a Reddit post I got a community guidelines strike, but just Google Gilliman's thoughts about the morality of the Great Crusade, and it should be the first link. Mortarion wasn't really known as a very outgoing or passionate guy. He kept mostly to himself, hence many of his brothers were unaware of his attitude, intentions, or motivations. He didn't seem to have an issue with the Great Crusade, but he was disgusted by the use of psykers, pushing for the Council of Nicaea to abolish the use of war powers beyond the basic essentials. He then decided to join the factions of traitors who use the warp like I use my cumsock, so his convictions aren't ones I take very seriously. He just kind of trudges along. Magnus was initially hyped about the Great Crusade, an opportunity to explore the galaxy, gain more knowledge, and read more books. However, he suffered numerous setbacks that kinda ruined it for him. Firstly, his legion had been infected by Titsnitch, causing most of them to turn into Chaos Spawn. He sacrificed one of his eyes to save them. By the time he had rebuilt his legion, the pressure from Lehman and Mortarion caused the Emperor to outlaw the use of the warp. Considering Magnus loves the warp like a fat kid with low blood sugar loves a chocolate bar, this was a huge L. The L got even huger when Magnus broke the Emperor's Webway project and got his spine snapped by Lehman as a result of that. Then his soul was shattered, and he's kind of been having a bit of a shit one ever since. So whilst he enjoyed the actual Crusade part, he didn't get to enjoy it for long in between all of his little, incidences. None probably enjoyed the Great Crusade more than Horus. Horus was by the Emperor's side since pretty much day one of the Crusade, being the second son to be rediscovered after Alfarius. He believed in his father's vision and caused with all his heart, performing incredibly well. His loyalty could not be faulted at all, until it suddenly very much could. A combination of the Emperor's poor parenting skills, combined with Horus's daddy issues and insecurities, combined with a chaos knife to the gut, caused Horus to go full jihad mode and ruin everything, including the Great Crusade he had cherished for 2 centuries. Damn. Lorgar didn't quite understand the job description of the Great Crusade. The Emperor wanted to conquer as much of the galaxy as physically possible in preparation of future threats, like the Orcs and Rangdan. The Crusade had to be rapid and efficient, or they would miss their window of opportunity. Hence, when Lorgar joined the Great Crusade, he got put in the naughty corner pretty quick. That's because when he conquered a world, he would remain there for months or even years, converting the population into a bunch of God Emperor worshippers, something the Emperor, a devout atheist, despised. So not only was Lorgar taking ages, but he was also violating the Emperor's vision. As such, Lorgar got spanked really fucking hard. After this spanking, he fell to chaos, so in terms of Great Crusade enjoyment, it's a bit not quite there. I mean, I'm sure he enjoyed all the converting and the fire sale on choir boys, but that was about it. Vulcan was in a similar boat to Gilliman. He respected the Emperor and agreed with his vision, but all the genocide, bloodshed and war was hard on the big cuddly man. I mean, yeah, slightly hypocritical because he was the one who set a defenseless Eldar child on fire, but he regretted it afterwards, so that counts for something. Whatever grievances he had with the Emperor's Crusade were not even nearly enough to tip him towards the traitor's cause. Vulcan remained a steadfast loyal son of the Emperor despite the horrors he had witnessed. Corvus Corax was the only Primarch who was told of Chaos's existence before the heresy broke out. Such was the trust the Emperor placed within him. Corvus's first test as a Primarch was to nuke a city in order to force the enemies to surrender. A tough choice. The Great Crusade was just like that choice on a much bigger scale. Tough, violent and difficult, but with a choice that would benefit mankind overall. Unfortunately, Corvus was one of those sideline Primarchs we didn't really get a ton of lore of, but I assume he had a sensible midway attitude towards the Crusade, necessary evil and whatnot. And finally, Alfarius. Alfarius probably found the Crusade to be a ton of fun, considering he spent most of it disguised as a Marine from nearly each legion. As such, Alfarius got to know most of his brothers pretty well, despite them not even knowing he even existed. His legion acted in the shadows, softening up enemy armies for the other legions to swoop in and mop up, most of the time the incoming legion not even knowing the Alpha Legion had done most of the work for them. Alfarius was very arrogant, and he liked doing shit like that for the lols, so I can comfortably say that he enjoyed himself thoroughly until Rogueldorn sliced them up like a fucking shish kebab with a Giga Chad chainsword. Happens to the best of us, buddy. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be. Only $1 per month give you access to a boatload of schmentai. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the real subscribe button for more opinionated content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.